Hi Wildcats, it's Miss Dominguez again, back with another chapter of the book Wanderers. I know it's been a while, and if you need a refresher, feel free to go back to our YouTube channel and you can find the other chapters that I've read. So far we're on chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Magic, Mischief, and Nonsense. While the kettle boiled, Tilly seized the chance to run upstairs to her room and dig out her mum's copy of Alice in Wonderland, tucking Mary's photo inside the cover. Granddad wasn't at the till when she returned with the tea. She tracked him down in the corner of the shop that they rather grandly called the office, although it was really just a desk tucked into a corner of the 4th floor where customers didn't venture as regularly. As she headed toward the office, a sweet, smoky smell lingered in the air, one that got stronger as she got closer to the desk. Alongside a murmur of voices, someone very posh was responding to Granddad's questions, and as Tilly rounded the corner, she saw a tall, elegant man in an expensive-looking gray coat sitting opposite Granddad. To Tilly's surprise, he was smoking a black pipe, which was the cause of the sweet scent in the air. And he was wearing an odd hat with a flap on each side, even though it was always cozy inside the shop. "I don't mean to be rude, but I don't think you should be smoking in here," she said, putting down Granddad's cup. The man and Granddad stopped talking abruptly and stared at her, before turning to look at each other. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your meeting, Granddad," Tilly said, instantly worried she'd been too terse with someone who looked decidedly important. "I just wanted to ask you something, but I'll come back later." Granddad nodded mutely, and Tilly went back downstairs. But only a few moments later, she heard her name being called. "Tilly!" Granddad's voice came down the stairs. "Wait for me a sec, will you?" Tilly paused, so Granddad could catch up with her. "Sorry about that, love," he said, back to his usual self. "I was just deep in conversation and entirely forgot I'd asked you for a cup of tea. Sorry if I was strange with you. You know how I get. Can't concentrate on more than one thing at a time." "It's okay," Tilly said. "Who was that anyway? And why were you letting him smoke?" Granddad looked sheepish. He's an old friend, and he likes doing things his way, so I let the rules slide for him and turn a blind eye. I know it's ill-advised." So this is a silhouette, kind of the outlined, filled-in picture of the man that was speaking with Granddad upstairs. And some of you, or maybe some of the parents, might know who this is based on the silhouette of the pipe and the hat. Very famous character. We'll find out in a little bit who it is. "I can't seem to turn a corner in this place without interrupting someone else's conversation," Tilly said. "What on earth do you mean, sweetheart?" Granddad said. "Well, I barged in on Grandma catching up with a friend yesterday, too," Tilly said. "And that lady vanished as soon as I interrupted. I just seemed to make everything awkward." "Which lady was that?" Granddad asked. I think she was called Lizzie," Tilly said. Grandma said she reminded her of Mum. Granddad took a deep breath and then smiled warmly at Tilly. "Enough reminiscing. What were you coming to ask me about?" Tilly showed him the book she still had tucked under her arm. "Alice in Wonderland. Perfect research for the party. Can you believe we've never had an Alice theme before in all our years of autumn parties? It's one of Mum's, Tilly explained, passing it to Granddad, who opened the cover automatically and saw the photo that Tilly had shown him yesterday. He stilled for a fraction of a moment before placing his palm on the photo like it was on the cheek of a child. It's a lovely connection to have, isn't it? Granddad said, holding the photo up to his glasses. Having the same book she's reading in the photo. She loved Alice in Wonderland too, he said, closing the book and pointing to the cover. Do you know why she liked them so much? Tilly said, remembering her decision to try to find out more about her mother's tastes in books. Well, as I've said before, she always felt a very personal connection to a little princess, Granddad said carefully. And why do any of us love Alice's adventures in Wonderland? Magic, mischief, nonsense, all the good stuff. I wish I could talk to her about it, Tilly said. Me too, sweetheart, Granddad said. Me too. He looked into her eyes quite seriously for a moment, before an extravagant stomach rumble invaded the silence. Well then, I suppose I'd best check on lunch. It'll be ready soon. Pop down before too long, hey? He gave her a kiss on the top of her head and set off toward the kitchen. Tilly found the nearest chair, sat down, and began reading the familiar first few sentences. Soon, she was lost in the wonder of Alice. Reassured by the scenes and characters she knew so well, and soothed by knowing that her mother had made the same journey years before. Should we go on to chapter 6? That was a short chapter. Let's do chapter 6 too. So chapter 6. Trouble always starts when you are out of proportion with whom you are talking to. That's a long title for a chapter title, isn't it? Trouble always starts when you are out of proportion with whom you are talking to. Chapter 6. After a lunch of creamy leek and potato soup with chunks of homemade bread and salty butter, that sounds good, Tilly headed out to find Jack, ready to beg or steal something sweet. But before she made it to Jack's cafe at the back of the ground floor, she was struck on the forehead by a jelly bean. Turning in the direction it had come from, she saw a girl in a full-skirted blue dress sitting on the stairs, lazily throwing jelly beans towards the nearest bookshelf. Oh, did I hit you? I am so sorry. I was aiming for the cat. Does it have a name? Do you think it likes sweets? Tilly stared at her, and the girl widened her eyes in impatience. The cat? What's it called? My cat is Dinah. She's called Al. The girl looked directly at her, and Tilly felt that little itch in her brain. Alice? She's called Alice? You don't seem to be very sure about it, do you? The girl said, peering at Tilly. But never mind that, because my name is Alice too. How curious. Alice, Tilly repeated. Yes, Alice, the girl said again slowly. And what is your name? Matilda, Tilly said. Whatever your name is, there's always time for good manners. It's very rude to interrupt. Oh, I'm sorry, Tilly said. It's nice to meet you, Alice. Would you like a cup of tea, maybe? Nice to meet you, Matilda. Alice replied and bobbed a neat curtsy. Tilly tried to copy, but just ended up doing a small, awkward bow. And thank you, but no thank you. I don't tend to eat or drink in new places until I've thoroughly got my bearings. Alice looked Tilly up and down. We both seem to be around the same size, though, which is a good sign. Trouble always starts when you are out of proportion with whom you are talking to. That's a strange thing to say, don't you think? But if we think of the story of Alice in Wonderland, and if you haven't read the book, then perhaps you've watched the Disney movie, the cartoon, or maybe the newer movies that are live action, which I enjoy too. What can you remember about proportion? And that would be the size of things compared to the size of other things. In Alice in Wonderland, the proportions or the sizes of things in a scene, in a part of the book or a part of the movie, were different. Like when Alice meets the singing flowers in the cartoon version, right? Alice is this big, and the flowers are all taller than her, and she's lost in their garden. So that's what they're talking about when they're talking about proportions. And this girl that's in the bookstore with Tilly is talking about that. And her name's Alice. And she has a cat named Dinah, who Alice in the book Alice in Wonderland also had a cat named Dinah. I don't know. Something strange is happening here. Let's keep reading. Are you looking for a book? Tilly asked. Not especially, although I'm never adverse to finding a book along my way. They come in handy sometimes, except you never know what's inside until it's too late, is my experience. She sighed extravagantly. Do you know, someone once told me that explanations take such a dreadful long time that one should focus on adventures, and I've rather come around to their way of thinking. So, if you'll excuse me. And with that, Alice skipped toward the back of the bookshop, past a round little man with a very neat mustache who was coming the other way. The little man gave no indication of having seen her, but gave a neat bow in Tilly's direction. Excusez-moi, mademoiselle. Tilly's head spun, but as she turned round to watch the man leaving, she found herself face to face with the red-headed girl from that morning. They stared at each other. You! The girl said, sounding surprised. You! Tilly said. You're back! You seem so familiar to me from somewhere. What school do you go to? The girl tilted her head to one side and stared hard at Tilly. I go to school in Avonlea, she said, near my home at Green Gables. And your name is Anne? Tilly said slowly. With an E, Anne reminded her. Anne with an E from Green Gables. Anne of Green Gables? The girl nodded, still openly staring at Tilly. But who are you? Anne asked. Oh, I'm Tilly. Tilly with a Y. From here. But you remember me? And now I'm here, and I remember you, Anne said in wonder. And I said we literally met this morning, Tilly repeated. But how can you be Anne of Green Gables? She's not a real person. Oh, well, I'm absolutely really here, she said, reaching out and touching Tilly gently on the arm. Is this a joke? Tilly said, looking behind her as if she would see hidden cameras somewhere, or wondering if it was part of some elaborate setup by Granddad to entertain her during the holidays. You're from a story. Why, yes, Anne replied happily, not seeming at all perturbed by this fact, and settling herself on the stairs. Well, why on earth does being from a book mean I'm not real? Anne asked. I'm as real as you or this shop, or Julius Caesar, or the Lady of Shalott. You can touch my hair if you'd like, and you will see it is ever so real. Tilly had to admit that Anne's physical presence was undeniable. Right, Tilly said, sitting down next to Anne, determined to try to wrap some logic around what seemed to be happening. Well, what were you doing in Green Gables before you came here? How did you get out? I was sitting in the orchard, imagining all the places I might visit when I'm older, and then I was here. But how? Tilly was almost bursting with frustration. I don't know. I just was. I think it's rather marvelous. If you like, I can invent a thrilling story about how I got here with magic spells and a glittering portal. Maybe some kind of benevolent but cursed princess living in a tower who writes poetry and is only allowed a single glass of water each day. Tilly interrupted her before she got even more carried away. But how will you get back? Won't there be gaps in your book, spoiling your story somehow? You being here? I'll just go back after I'm here. And I don't think it can spoil my story. I rather think only I can spoil my own story. Tilly sighed and put her head on her knees and then thought of something. Did you see the other girl who was here? She asked. Alice? But when she raised her head, Anne was no longer there. My goodness. So far, we have Anne of Green Gables who's appeared, and now we've learned that she's actually the Anne of Green Gables from the book, Anne of Green Gables. And Tilly has met a girl named Alice who seems to have a lot of similarities to Alice from Alice in Wonderland. So it seems like the characters in the books somehow are coming to life inside this bookstore that belonged to Tilly's grandparents. And there's some sort of secret that Granddad and Grandma know about. Because I think maybe Tilly's mom had some of the same experiences that Tilly's having. I don't know. But that was chapter 5 and chapter 6. So tune in next time for chapter 7, which is called Imaginary Friends. I can't wait for it. I miss you, Wildcats. Have a fun but safe summer, and we'll see you soon. Bye.